Hello everyone, this is Jotto, and welcome to my Cards That Need Buffs video. Now, this video is actually part of a thread. Yeah, it's confusing that. Anyway, it's in the description if you're watching this from YouTube, and if you came here from the forums, hello. Now, as far as any responses to this video goes, put it in the comment section, that's fine. But if you want the other people to see the discussion, then I would suggest putting it in the Spellweaver forums topic, which, as I said, will be in the description, just to kind of keep all the discussion together, which means that everyone else will see it, and we can get a nice little discussion going between all the different communities from all over. Anyway, so the purpose of this thread is to go over a couple of different things. First of all, is two major design issues with some of the cards that are bad in Spellweaver, and second is to go over some of the cards that just don't see play, that don't really fit in these categories. So the first things first, I'll be going over all the changes that are in the thread. So if you just want to watch the video, I would suggest having the thread up on the side so you can refer to some of my suggested changes and to my little section of logic. Now, the first thing I want to talk about is the one speed problem. Now, random note, this video is more about the problems as opposed to the changes. Now, I do have suggested changes because you kind of need them for a suggested buffs thing. However, it's more about fixing the problems as opposed to saying, this is what you should change, because I haven't tested them, obviously. I can't test my changes and things like that, so I'm not saying that they're good changes. I just think that in the aim of making the game more understandable and just more fun to play, we have a lot of underplayed cards that would just add basically an expansion to the game if they became better. Now, first things first, we're going to go over the one speed issue. Now, corruption in general has a couple things that define it as an aspect. One of these things is big one speed finishers. They have three of them: Undead Hydra, Dread Knight, and Ziara. The problem is they're all awful. I'm just going to say that. They're all terrible. So, what is the problem? Well, the one speed problem, as I like to call it, is the issue behind one speed as a drawback. The reason for this is because you lose a lot of tempo when you play a creature, but a one speed creature can't block most of the time, which means that you're losing effectively an entire turn of tempo to get this creature, so it better be an amazing creature. However, my proposed fix to this one speed issue is to change one speed creatures to have enters the battlefield or persistent effects that apply when you play them. So, just to kind of show what I mean, we'll start with, in the thread I started with Dread Knight, but we'll start with Undead Hydra here since that's the first one in my little favorite section. So, Undead Hydra, I've suggested that it's changed to unstoppable, and instead of gaining heads basically when you attack it, so it gains might emblems, it instead has a sort of acid spit ability, where when you play it, you distribute 3 weakness counters, maybe 2, but 3 weakness counters to a number of creatures. So you can you can put a weakness counter on up to 3 creatures. So the idea behind this is that you play it and it makes up for the tempo loss by either killing or weakening some creatures, and it gives Corruption the AoE that they need, because Corruption does not have AoE right now. They have Ziara, but Ziara comes down so late. I know the Undead Hydra would only come down a turn earlier, but that matters a lot. And also you get to go 5 mana, 2 aspects, which curves into Infernal Tribute, which is a much better curve in that regard. And it means that those two work together. You can kill some small creatures, then Infernal, and that would buff their late game, making it better in control decks and making Undead Hydra into a more appealing finisher in the more aggressive decks. Now, on top of that, it actually works lore-wise because Hydras are known for 2 things: regeneration and like acid spit and fire breathing and things like that. And it's an Undead Hydra, so maybe it's lost the ability to grow extra heads. Anyway, as there's a bit of an echo in my room, I think. No, it's not that bad actually. So, apparently it's only I can only hear it when I've got my headphones on. But anyway, so Undead Hydra is the kind of thing where the fact that it's undead, maybe it can't regenerate anymore, but it can still have acid spit, which kind of corrodes away their stats. So I do like that particular type of change, both lore-wise and in terms of being able to fix the one speed problem as far as the Undead Hydra is concerned, and giving Corruption one of its finishers back. Now, the next card I want to talk about is Dread Knight. Now, my proposed change to Dread Knight is change its ability from declared as part of a final attack to once per turn. Now, what this means is when you play it and at the beginning of every turn after that. It's the same effect that Bloodseeking Mutant has, as that once per turn thing. And what this would allow you to do is effectively block a creature by putting it back on defense when you play it. As well as the fact that at the beginning of your turn you push it back, which means it's less confusing, because I think every new player has been there, where you attack a creature with 3 guys, and then you attack with Dread Knight, and you realize the effect isn't optional, and so you push whatever you attack back, and you miss a whole bunch of damage. So it stops that from happening. It makes it better when you play it, and also means if you have 2 in a row, for instance, you can push 2 creatures back and attack, making it a more efficient finisher. So that would be my suggestion for Dread Knight, since its one problem is it's very, very slow, and that's sort of the one-speed problem coming back again. Now, the last card I want to talk about here with the one-speed problem as far as Corruption goes is Ziara. Now, Ziara is supposed to be the counterpart to Karthus and Red Dragon. Not so much Antriel, even though it kind of has the same cost, but it's not so much Antriel, and the reason for this is because all the evil aspect, big well, not necessarily legendary, but big epics that cost 4 mana, 4 aspects, are supposed to kill things, basically. And Red Dragon is a good finisher. Karthus kills them immediately, helps you stabilize. Ziara really doesn't, and the reason for this is because the effect is symmetrical. If it only affected the enemy creatures, it would allow you to get efficient trades on that turn, and it would also stop the very awkward thing about Ziara, which is that it shuts down a lot of your very useful creatures, like Mesmerizing Spirit, and Vermin, and Infected Survivor. Infected Survivor is in theory good with Ziara, but in practice you actually want the blocker a lot of the time. So it shuts down a lot of your creatures, and doesn't really shut down a lot of their creatures. On top of that, it only 1 speed, so it can't dominate the board on its own. You need support for your Ziara, otherwise it will just very, very easily be picked off, and it's very slow. And so I feel as if Ziara should be changed to a role where it dominates the board on its own. I don't know whether this would make it playable, but it would definitely make it closer to playable, and that is the aim. Now, the last 1-speed creature I want to talk about is the Militia. Now, the Militia, keep in mind, is actually a card along with its token on Alexa. Now, my suggestion with Militia is a very simple one, which is just changing its speed to 2. The reason for this is because Militia has an issue with it. We saw with Guards that Militia can be useful in combat, because they gain 3 speed after you play Guards. The problem with Militia is they're designed to impact combat in small ways, and just serve as sort of extra troops that you can use with buffs and things like that. The problem is that they can't ever attack or block anything, more or less, because there aren't any 1-speed creatures around currently. As a result, the Militia just kind of turn into these very, very easy to kill soldiers to debuff the rest of the board. So as a result, Night Recruiter, for instance, gets very small very quickly, because you can just pick off all the Militia. On top of that, they all die to Fire Blast no matter what. They're not very good against red, things like that. So I feel like making them into 2-speed would allow you to play Militia as a card. It would allow you to use them in combat, although not against really big speed creatures like Library Guards, but you could use them in combat against things like Goblins, for instance. And it's not like red would be bad against soldiers. They still have Fia, they still have Fire Blast, all these really good anti-soldiers cards. So why not give them a card that's actually decent against red? This was shown with the Dwarf Musketeer, changed to ranged. A lot of people thought it would be very, very good. It turned out to just be okay to good, because the 1 HP really is quite bad. But the fact that it can be used in combat more effectively kind of shows that it's not that dangerous. And with Militia, yes, you can get them for free, but you don't have that much draw power, and it wouldn't affect the interaction with Stronghold Metropolis. It would make Order Dominion control a bit better, which is fine, because Order Dominion control is pretty bad, actually, as a deck at the moment. And it would just buff it up a little bit. Now, it could be slightly too strong, but that's the thing about beta. You can make changes and then come back and try other things. As I said, if anyone kind of thinks I'm not really addressing the true issue, just put it in the thread because I really want to get a discussion going, because I feel like discussion breeds innovation as far as this is concerned. Anyway, so the next problem I want to go over, so that was the one speed issue. The next problem I want to go over is the weak hero problem. Now, Spellweaver is always going to have hero balancing issues. It just will. It's not avoidable. There's always going to be some heroes better than others. And you can keep fixing that, but every time you balance, there's going to be a new best hero in town. However, what I'm focusing on is the heroes that see zero play, and why they don't see any play, and how you can make them into just tier 2 heroes that can be useful in certain decks, and could actually see some play. So, the 3 heroes I've got here are Cronus, Enoch, and Nepharos. Just as with the previous section, I'm going to be going over these in order in favorites, as opposed to order in the thread. First things first, Cronus. Now, Cronus has a couple issues with him right now. And the main point is that Soul Ravens are bad on defense because they can't trade with anything and you lose 2 life, and they're bad on offense because even if you get damage in, they're only 1/2s and they can only grow every other turn, which means they're not really decent threats. As a result, Cronus has become just a really, really bad Alexa, basic Alexa. And there was a Implant Cronus deck, but that just was proven that instead of going Implant Cronus, what you should be doing is playing Implant Elric. And that's just better. So Cronus has really fallen onto the side here. And I think the fix that would help here is just making the Soul Ravens 1/1s. That would make them able to trade on defense, and you only lose 1 life on defense. You could use Flash Freeze with them, maybe. And it also means that when you have nothing to do, you can just make a Soul Raven that's actually relevant. And when you're attacking, you make them into 2/2s, which are decent creatures for the 2 aspect, 2 life, and 2 mana that is required to make one. So it's a very simple fix, but I feel like it would address a lot of Cronus' issues. Anyway, on to Enoch, which currently holds the mantle of arguably worst hero in the game, along with basic and Nepharos. They both see zero play for different reasons. Enoch is more of a demons-focused hero, whereas Nepharos is more of a zombies-focused hero. Now, the problem with Enoch is that you need to be very far ahead to use his ability. You can use it with demons because you have the zero-cost Nightbringers, but demons isn't really that good, and Enoch gives you 1 permanent boost for sacrificing a creature, which is a big deal. You have to sacrifice a creature and you get 1 boost that's permanent, which is 1 life for each creature. That just isn't very relevant for most decks. It's only really relevant for demons because of Dark Portal. And every single other deck that could run Enoch doesn't really care about their life total unless the game is completely stalled out. So as a result, Enoch is not that useful. Now my suggestion, and this may not exactly be the best suggestion, but my suggestion is to change it to +1 attack just permanently. Just +1 attack. Because the problem with Enoch right now is that if you're not playing in demons, you just sacrifice a creature, you attack him, you get like 12 damage in because he doesn't block. But then it's like massive attack. You just wait until it's your turn and then just kill all of his guys. And because he had to sacrifice a guy, he has to be very far ahead for him to not just lose at that point. And that's an issue. Being forced to be ahead for a hero to be useful is a bad thing. So in this case, making the attack boost permanent would actually give you an incentive to sacrifice a creature. Maybe it'd have to be 3 mana, maybe you couldn't have it as 2 mana anymore, but the point is I think you need a permanent boost as a result of the hero power. We've seen this with Kayanu, Elric. It gives permanent boosts that are relevant. So I really feel as if Enoch should have a change that makes his attack boost permanent, just so he can actually see more play in other decks. On to the 3rd hero in this section, Basic Nepharos, also known as a Pharos Aspiring Necromant. Now, there are 2 problems with Nepharos. The first one is that Zombies doesn't have a way of ending the game, but that's more to do with the changes I mentioned earlier to Undead Hydra and Dread Knight, giving them an actual finisher. The other issue with Nepharos is that his hero ability is supposed to gain you tempo by giving you a favorable trade. The problem is that this only works when you have a board position and you're ahead, because then you can attack and he can't mess up your trade in any way. So my suggestion, and someone else I think mentioned this a while ago, but my suggestion is to change his speed reduction until start of your turn, which means that it would apply for your attacking phase, but then it would also apply for your blocking phase. This would make it harder to attack into key creatures like Insatiable Ghoul, for instance, and like Flesh Sculptor. It would make it harder to actually attack into a zombie's board every other turn, and it would allow you to not gain tempo over your opponent, but it would allow you to stabilize. It would be very, very good against Ancient Tree Ant as well. You stop it from blocking and attacking, which is important. But the point is, it would actually allow you to stabilize tempo-wise, and that's something zombies does not have the ability to do. You can't stabilize tempo-wise. Infernal Tribute is an expensive card. They don't have any AoE that's cheap, so they just can't stabilize. They can't reset the tempo in any way. And by changing Entangle to work until the start of your turn, it allows you to play a creature, stop them from attacking it for one turn, and play another creature which has stabilized the board. It doesn't have like a massive swing to it, but it's only a 1 mana ability, so it shouldn't do an insane amount, but the problem is now it just really doesn't do anything. So I think that would be a good buff to the basic Nepharos. Now I'm going to move on to the other changes section. There's 4 creatures in this, 4 cards in this section, which this is just changes that don't really fit into the 2 overarching issues that I talked about earlier, which is the weak heroes and the 1 speed problem. And I'm just going to go over 3 creatures and 1 spell that are either not really seeing play in any way or just a bit below what they should be. Let's get the one that's just a bit below what it should be out of the way. Protector of the Innocent. Now, I'm actually going to suggest that Protector of the Innocent gets its cost changed to 4 mana, 1 order, 1 general. The reason for this is because Protector, this doesn't affect it in Angels because Angels is mono anyway. But the reason for this is that Protector only sees play in Angels because you need it for Triangelica, but Protector is by far the weakest angel, and it's supposed to be a turn 5 threat, but in reality, if you play it in a 2-color deck, it's a turn 6 or 7 threat, and then it's just not worth it. On top of that, Guardian of the Faithful has a single other, like just general, in its cost, so it comes down on the same turn. You have an extra aspect, so it should be more powerful, but the point is it comes down on curve, even in 2-color decks. Which means Protector of the Innocent is completely useless in 2-color decks. Now, if you change it to 1 general, 1 order, this would do a couple things. The first thing is it allows you to play it in aggressive order decks that need a threat that can actually stick in play in the mid-game on curve, and that would actually help order aggro decks a lot, which is good, because order aggro and mid-range decks don't really exist right now. It's basically just Angels. On top of that, it would increase the card pool of order cards that can be played in 2-color decks. Currently we really only have Pacify and Ray and arguably Guardian, but you don't really want to go double order, and then the new path to Transcendence, and then you'd have Protector of the Innocent as well, giving more incentive to run order in a 2-color deck, which is important. So that's just my little fix for that. Now, Protector is one of those interesting things because it's currently, power level wise, it's arguably slightly below Haldiri Rider and Bloodseeking Mutant, and I would actually say it's more on par with something like Spectral Aurite. Maybe slightly above Spectral Aurite, but it's around in par with Spectral Aurite. But the thing is, I think it's slightly above because it's an angel and that works with Triangelica and such. But the thing is that Protector of the Innocent is a double order requirement, so why isn't it a single order requirement? I mean, the other cards that are similar in power level are single color requirement, and it's not even as powerful as some of them, like Bloodseeking Mutant. It's not even as strong as Bloodseeking, but it has a higher requirement in resource cost. So by bringing it more in line with those cards, you're promoting order as a color. Anyway, on to Frost Elemental. Frost Elemental has had a wealth of changes suggested about it because it's one of the worst cards in the game. I've got 2. And this really does show the issues with changing Frost Elemental. So, my first change that I could suggest is changing its ability to flash freeze. So, deal 1 damage and freeze. This would fulfill its anti-aggro role, being a 1/3 with 2 speed at a 3-drop, and you could kill a goblin, for instance, when you play it. That would be good. You could also trade with a lizard. I mean, you still can now, but the point is that it gives you more utility in that regard. Now, the thing about that is that while that card would be balanced, it's also on the exact same curve slot as Force Mage Protector, which is awkward, because how would you split that? Would you just play 4 Force Mage? Would you play like 3-1, 2-2, maybe 4 Force Mage, 1 Frost Elemental or something? How would you do that? Because Force Mage is a good card. Do you really want those on the same curve? Maybe not. The other change is just changing its mana cost just to 2. Leave the card as is, change it to 2, and I like this change a bit more because it incentivizes blue openings in mid-range decks. So let me explain here. In control decks, you don't really want the defensive 2-drop in blue there. Maybe you do instead of Disquisitive, but you've got New Horizons is the main point. You want to go New Horizons on 2. However, a 2-drop in blue would incentivize mid-range decks to go blue openings. You can go, even if you're not playing New Horizons, because it would give you Frost Elemental into Protector, which would be a very good defensive opening. And you could go Frost Elemental, Protector, Library Guards, then your second color. And that would incentivize mid-rangey styles of blue decks, which don't really exist. Blue is used in 2 aspects right now. It's a supporting color that only is used for Force Mage and Library Guards in red. And it is a supporting color for ramp in control decks. And also for draw. That's about it. It doesn't really have a solid base to stand on as far as an early game goes. So by incentivizing starting blue, one, you make mostly mono blue or base blue decks stronger. Dust Titan helps in this regard, making base blue decks stronger. And by buffing Frost Elemental, you're also making Advanced Darius better, who's a hero who is on the verge of being around tier 2, which is okay. So, like with cards, I've always said tier 1 is the best, tier 2 is good, tier 3 is okay, tier 4 is bad. But when it comes to heroes, it's really only like best heroes, okay heroes, bad heroes. There's only really 3 tiers. So Frost Elemental may catapult Darius into being on par with a lot of the other heroes, since now he's kind of on par in, he's good in Trials, but in Constructed he's a little bit below. He does see some play here and there, but not really. So Frost Elemental would help him out there if he was 2 mana, for instance, or even if you're incentivized to play him because of that freeze effect. So anyway, the last of these creatures that I am suggesting a change to is Nightbringer. Now, Nightbringer, I've heard a lot of changes for Nightbringer. Random other point is, this was Rajan's and Sankala's suggestion that I kind of worked around with and came up with my own version, which was that making it into a 3/3 if you had 10 cards in your graveyard or something, or 15 cards in your graveyard. But the change I'm suggesting is making it into a 2/1 with maybe the same mill effect. I don't know how they feel about that, but just make it into a 2/1 flying with once per turn lose a life. Now, the problem with Nightbringer is in Demons it's just a chump blocker, it's used for ramping, things like that with your Harpies, but it's a pretty useless card. It's mostly just used for the ability to sacrifice it and to chump block things. But honestly, I think that Nightbringer could be buffed up a bit for 2 reasons. First of all, in Demons, you're getting a 2/1, which means you get to end the game faster, but you also get to trade with things, which would increase the power of the deck, but then you're losing life, which compensates for it, because ultimately Demon Portal decks rely on their life total to actually stay high enough so they can win the game. So it balances it out there a little bit, but allows you to trade with things like Lizards, which means you'd only lose 2 life maybe, or even 1 life maybe, instead of the probably 4 that you'd lose to that Lizard. But then on the flip side of things, you've got Zombies, and Corruption aggro decks would now have 8 1-drops with 2 attack that they can play, which is very similar to Red. Zombie is better than Lizard, and Nightbringer would be better than Goblin. This is important because Red has always been the better aggressive color due to burn. But if Corruption was given a higher creature quality in the early game, you've already got Insatiable Ghoul, you could run 8 1-drops, Insatiable Ghoul, you've got higher creature quality in the early game, there'd be an incentive to run Corruption aggro as an alternative to Rage aggro. You could even run a 2-color deck running Corruption early game creatures along with some burn in red like Fireball or maybe Dragonfire for closing out, things like that, but less focused on stuff like Phoenix. So you could actually have a mix of what aggressive deck do you want to play and which one has better matchups due to their card choices. And I think anything that increases the number of decks in each archetype is good. So you can have different types of aggro, different types of mid-range, different types of control. This is the kind of stuff I'm trying to promote with these changes. Keep in mind that a lot of these are just based around the problems with the cards as opposed to, and the aspects especially, as opposed to the exact changes on the cards themselves. Now, the last card I've got as a suggested change here is Power Surge. Now, you may notice in the thread, Power Surge has this massive paragraph, which is basically a wall of text. So, yeah, Power Surge has its like little section. But it turns out Power Surge is really bad when compared to New Horizons, and I was trying to figure out why, because I've never been able to, and then it kind of struck me. New Horizons is a +0 card advantage-wise, whereas Power Surge is a -1. And I'll just explain this. New Horizons, you discard a card to play it, basically, because you're playing the card, which means it's not in your hand anymore, and you're paying 2 mana. So what do you get for that? You get a aspect level, which would have required you to discard a shrine anyway, so that cancels out the card disadvantage. On top of the fact that for 2 mana, you're getting a ramp effect, you're getting color fixing, and you're getting the fact that you thin your deck of shrines you don't want, including skill shrines that are bad draws later on in the game when you already have one. But with Power Surge, you're paying 2 mana to ramp and gain a mana, but you're not drawing a card from that mana like you would have normally. So you're basically paying 2 mana to get a skill shrine mana without the skill, and also you don't thin your deck, you don't get rid of dead draws later on, and you don't color fix. That's why it's so bad. So my suggestion for Power Surge is to make it draw a card. Now, this may seem completely broken at first thought, but I had a discussion with this with Rajan, and compared to New Horizons, on paper at least, it comes out being about the same power-wise. Just this is why that section was so large as far as typing for Power Surge, because there's a lot of just like discussing what the bonuses are. So New Horizons would let you color fix, it would let you thin your deck, and it would let you get rid of skill shrines and things that are useless late game. The disadvantage, and this is why I only play 3 New Horizons, is that if you draw 2 in most matchups, the second one's dead, and if you draw them late game, they're dead cards completely. Unless you're playing like Corruption for Siphon or Word of Fire or things like that. But with Power Surge, if you drew a card, the bonus, you still don't have color fixing, you still don't have thinning deck, thing like that. But the bonus is that you get to start in 1 color, Dominion, with Assassinate, Assassin, Power Surge, and you get to draw a card, which means that it's not a dead card later in the game, because you have all this extra mana, and you can just Power Surge, get more mana, and draw a card. Now, as far as would you just play 4 Power Surge, whereas I play 3 New Horizons, would you just play 4 Power Surge? Maybe. But I think playing 3 may also be correct, because you've still got, it may be a better card later in the game, even though it's worse earlier in the game. But the thing is, you still have this situation where if you draw 2 early, you always Divine Offering the second one. So you don't want 2 in your opening hand. Do you play 4 just so that you have the higher chance of getting it early? Maybe. But that's the whole thing about ramp spells in general. Would this make Word of Power useless? Not really, because Word of Power, first of all, is a very bad card, but second of all, it only saw a bit of play, and this was in, weirdly enough, Asperia's winning deck, which Pedro played 4, which I was not particularly fond of, but the point is he played 4, and that was for a Cataclysm ramp. But the Cataclysm ramp involves playing Word of Power on turn 3 or 4 when you went double Dominion. So if you have 3 mana double Dominion, you play Word of Power, you go up to 5, and then you Cataclysm the next turn, so you go up to 6. Power Surge doesn't let you do that, which means Word of Power's only application is still useful. Now, the other thing Power Surge lets you do here is it means that Dominion-based ramp is now a thing that actually works. So Thunderstorm Titan might see some play because you can ramp into Thunderstorm Titan on turn 3. which is actually a very powerful opening. The reason it doesn't happen is because Power Surge is such a bad card. Now, on top of that, it would allow for Corruption Dominion decks to actually happen, like controlled Corruption Dominion decks. Now, what I mean by this is that Corruption Dominion rely on a lot of mana for Necromantic Cult. They don't have any card draw, so Power Surge was just not an option because it loses you card advantage, and they don't want to run blue for the ramp. So you can Power Surge instead. You can go 3 aspects maybe with Power Surge. Maybe it holds the deck together a bit, or with the increase to the efficiency of some of the finishers in Corruption I'm suggesting, it could create a Corruption Dominion deck that works. And this is important because a lot of people like Corruption Dominion. I've built Corruption Dominion decks before, but in the last month I've actually had 4 or 5 different Corruption Dominion decks on stream that people have asked me, they've given me the list and they've said, what do you do with this? How do you make this a good deck? Because as it turns out, a lot of people like the playstyle of Corruption Dominion. But the problem with Corruption Dominion is you don't have the same tools that you need, like ramp, or like that stabilized finisher and control that Rage variants have, that Wisdom Dominion has, all these other control decks. And the same problem happens with Order Dominion that we talked a little bit about earlier with the Militia and the Protector of the Innocent. But anyway, so that's my entire sort of suggested changes section of this thread. So as I said, if you have anything to talk about as far as the changes goes, I would highly suggest, well, I mean, put it in the comment section if you like to, but I would highly suggest putting it in the thread itself. So that, one, you can format it and it makes it look nicer and things like that. But mostly is that you keep all the discussion in one area, which promotes more discussion and things like that, because that's always what these are about. We do actually have a changes thing coming up in just over a week, because it's the beginning of the season, so we should get one by the 10th. So that's why I'm making this video now in particular. And as I said, if you didn't catch it earlier, all of the changes I talked about are in the thread in the description. But anyway, thank you all for watching. If you like the content, please subscribe. If you have any feedback, just want to talk about stuff in the video, put it in the comment section below. But now, this has been Jotto, signing off.